Alright, time for another draft. Science.com. No, draftphysics.com. Debatephysics.com also. And but again, the debate is in no reasonable form. I make contentions and arguments. There is no counter argument. I point to something and say, explain it. They don't bother explaining it. So they don't explain anything, and then they just claim again, proven once again. Just keep saying this crap. So this is, look, I'm not going to reward this in any way because it's just bullshit. I've done my debunking. Okay, you present a video that's flawed. I point out the flaws. You don't do anything to counter argue and reclamate those arguments, and instead you just republish more nonsense. I mean, fuck you. It's a waste of time. So we'll just play the very beginning here. He just defeats the whole purpose of having this argument, frankly, because he just doesn't get any element of it. He doesn't understand how physics works. He doesn't understand the contradiction. He doesn't even understand that what he's claiming, that all of these storage devices do not conserve momentum. That is, springs and rubber bands don't conserve momentum, that you can destroy the momentum. You can put a certain momentum into them, create a storage, and then you can't get that momentum out, depending on what weight you put in front of them. That somehow it matters what weight you put in front of them. They'll give you a different amount of momentum depending on what weight you put in front of them, what mass. It's a bold assertion, and it comes with this as evidence.
Now, instead of using the launching device, I'm just going to use a rubber band, all right, as requested. I hope you're...
No, I didn't request it. I just stated it's not the same as a rubber band. It's not the ideal. You have a piece in between. It's a real thing. It's a real mass that's been pointed out. You don't think the real mass absorbs energy. Well, yes, it does. If you're moving a real mass, and you're saying that real mass is then going to bang into another mass, you have to account for the fact that you've moved that piece of matter, that it's absorbed the energy.
Happy now?
No, I'm not happy at all. I think you're just a despicable asshole. A complete waste of my goddamn time. Again, keep saying you've proven something, and this isn't what qualifies as proof. You haven't undone the evidence that exists. You haven't proven that Brozo's lever experiment with billiard balls was entirely and completely flawed. What was the fucking flaw? Because he didn't get your results. I didn't get them.
Okay, now let me show you everything in detail. So
I mean, this is just such bullshit. You show no details, and then you mock the idea that somebody should at least be able to see what the fuck you're doing. Where your flag is, where the damn sensor is. I've pointed it out like 3 times now. Why don't you just test your timers, okay? Put them next to each other, run something through them, and see if they tell the same fucking goddamn time. The speed. You haven't even done that. You haven't calibrated any of this bullshit, and you claim it's a proof. Poof. Poof.
put 2 nails. I nailed 2 nails in the plank, suspended the rubber band. I taped the center of the rubber band.
Yeah, I did this 6 months ago, a year ago. Okay, a year ago. And at the very moment I did this, I found out, hey, you know what? My fingers aren't good enough. That was the first thing noticed. Totally unreliable. And so, yeah, I conceded quick releases are required. So I had to do it the slower way, which is, I had to make little device, little loop of string. So I had to make a bunch of them because I had to redo the experiment, and then I had to cut the string because that's the only way to do this experiment with any hope of being fair.
This nail together with it.
So again, they don't think twice the velocity is a substantial difference in 2 experiments. So you're doing an experiment at 1 velocity, and then you're going to double the velocity and do the same experiment. And they don't think that that challenges your experimental device at all. That's the same thing. Okay, that something sliding through your fingers at twice the speed isn't substantially different than something slipping through your fingers at half the speed. It's not that there's no difference there. That's his, I guess, theory. It's clearly stupid.
Card, so I'm gonna push the card towards the center of the rubber band, all the way to this nail, and then launch it.
And he's not going to do it with 1 finger. No, he's going to put his fingers on both sides of the cart, making it even more likely that his fingers are going to fuck it up. And here he says the magic words.
Yes, with my hand.
Yes, with your hand. Okay, fine. You have just contempt for the whole process. You really just don't care. You really don't think quick releases matter. Well, I know they do. Okay, as I tested it, it really does make a difference. Fact. Okay, so I know that from personal experience, and I guess I can also figure it out because, yeah, Professor Lewin used quick releases and other physicists use quick releases, so I guess quick releases are a thing. It's a real thing. It's not a fake thing. It's a real thing. And you just couldn't have been bothered. So fuck you. I mean, just what a waste. Jackass. Alright. So, I will point out the conundrum. Okay, again, the paradox, the incongruity, the grotesque inconsistency of their physics theory. Alright, I mean, I've only been over this and over this and over this. Well, please provide some sort of counter explanation. Please explain to me why it works this way that you're claiming. That somehow heavy things are real easy to push, okay, but light things are really hard to push, except when they're in a gun. Somehow when they're in a gun, the light thing is really easy to push and the heavy thing's impossible to push. So, you conserve momentum in one circumstance, you don't conserve it in the other. I mean, where is this idea? Where did the momentum disappear to? So you have your 5-ton train, 10-ton train, where you lose half the kinetic energy by mathematical rule, not by physical facts, but by a mathematical fact. You can't do it any other way. There's no way. The ideal collision still loses half the energy. That's your physics, and you have to explain why that makes sense to you. That even when you have an ideal collision, you still lose half the energy. Stupid bastards. I mean, fuck. So I've done this before, this whole idea you can just put two guns, okay, put one gun inside the other gun, alright, same amount of explosive. And what do I get? I get 2 joules and 2 joules, okay. Just about almost nothing, right? So then I put a bullet in the gun, and all of a sudden now, okay, I get 2,000 joules here, and I get just 2 this way. Alright, now what if I put 2 bullets? Okay, I put 2 bullets, and I get 2,000 joules and 2,000 joules. I get 4,000 joules of energy out of it. So the same explosion produces 4 joules, 2,002 joules, or 4,000 joules. Same exact explosive. Does all of these things. Does that make any sense? No. Not even close to making any sense. Alright. and so in these experiments, exactly the opposite they're claiming. Okay, so I'm going to shoot lighter and lighter things. So this is sort of like the experiment by Professor Michael. Okay, Coop. I put a 2 mass here and a 2 mass here. Okay, and I get 2,000. All right, and then if I put a 1 mass on, okay, and a 1 mass on, I only get 1,000. Somehow the lighter things are harder to push. Somehow the momentum doesn't go into lighter things. That's their theory. And so we have this crap experiment again. And the argument is that this is the one they have to overcome, is that, Brozo did this experiment. These are billiard balls just being launched by a catapult and a consistent force spring. And this one, in fact, did go, 11 frames, and this took 19 frames. So it was almost a 2-to-1 relationship. So why in this experiment, pretty simple, just a lever, a spring pushes, how come I can get, okay, almost twice the velocity? And clearly it looked like twice the velocity. But in your experiment it doesn't work. How can the same spring conserve the momentum in one experiment, pretty much, and in the other experiment, within 10%, and in your experiment it's completely fails to conserve the momentum, losing 40% of the momentum? So his experiment is, yes, he takes the light car, 1 mass, and then a 2 mass car, and we only get 1.4. increase in the velocity. So we have a 1 velocity here, we only have a 1.4 velocity here. Half the mass, huge reduction, huge loss of momentum. And presumably he'll say if I take a 1/2 of that, a 1/4 mass, that it will likewise fail, okay, to even reach twice the velocity. And the lighter and lighter I go, the less and less momentum I'm going to get out of the experiment, and the heavier and heavier I go, the more and more velocity, the momentum I'm going to get. That's his theory. I'm saying the theory can't be reconciled with these other facts. It can't be reconciled with the fact that guns don't have any problem shooting lighter things faster. So how come explosions, okay, are just fine at producing consistent momentums, but somehow a spring or a rubber band can't conserve momentum? Well, the fact is it can. That's the Brozo experiment right here. Okay, and my own experiments, frankly, don't do this 1.4 thing. Yeah, they don't quite get to 2 because the complications are real. Okay, the fact is it's harder to do an experiment the faster the shit's moving. The faster the shit's moving, the more places there are to lose the energy. And the slower it's moving, the easier it is to conserve the energy. Just happens to be a fact. And the fact is, their theory is the more errors you can create and the more energy you can throw away, the more it comes out their way. It's to their advantage that, yeah, do the experiment sloppy, because that guarantees you'll lose the momentum, which is to their advantage. All right. So that's it. I don't need to say much more than that, right? I mean, we've been over it and over it. You have real conflicts in the evidence to reconcile. The fact is, it's all just weight, and it's weight for an amount of time. You can push with 10 pounds for 1 second, or you can push with 40 pounds for 1/4 of a second, and it's the same thing. It's the same energy, and you really can't create it and destroy it. But whatever. It's just disgusting that, after all of this bullshit, he would sit there and say, yes, I'm going to use my hand. I mean, fuck. Well, then we're back to zero. We haven't gotten anywhere in these conversations. If even Brozo concedes some need to satisfy the idea of doing a quick release, or at least finding some kind of mechanical release that seems better than using our very slow hands. All this stuff's happening in 1/10 of a second. I mean, you can just imagine, when you're pushing down on something or you're holding it, that there's this, there takes time for your skin to let go, and the whole time this thing has got pressure on it and it wants to leave. So there's no way to avoid friction with your fingers, and obviously the faster it wants to leave, the higher the velocity at which it wants to leave, the more likely it is your hands haven't left yet and it's leaving, that it's dragging across your skin, losing its velocity. I mean, it's easy to understand why, okay, twice the speed would matter rubbing against the surface of fingers. Greasy fingers, by the way. Yeah, just too silly. Anyway, so enough of this shit. Fuck this. I obviously have to do these experiments because there's nobody who can do them honestly. Okay, that's just the fact. We have the example of Ian Gosling, who hid the clay experiment, wouldn't show us. The clay experiment didn't come out his way, and never explained why it didn't come out his way. I mean, his explanation was nonsense. And then we have this 1.4 proven once again. This is what he's calling a proof. People should believe. He wants people to believe momentum isn't conserved, okay, because he's proven it hasn't been conserved. So something that really was a foundation in physics the whole time I have existed on planet Earth, frankly. I don't think I have at any time heard of physicists talk about destroying momentum. Here's an experiment where momentum is destroyed. There's no explanation for where it went. It was destroyed. Okay, the experiment doesn't have enough parts for you to explain where the momentum went, except the launching device. If I rule out the launching device, where did the momentum disappear to? What a fuck. Anyway, so enough. Yeah, just enough of that crap. So I'll just keep making these arguments where I point out there's conflicts in the evidence. You can't deny the conflicts in the evidence, the contradictions in the evidence, and for you to claim a proof is just being a jackass. Especially when you explain nothing, and you don't even have enough credibility. You don't even have enough concern about your credibility to do the simple thing of at least testing your timing gates.